Jodi, just very briefly, did an internship at MTV, and then she went to work for MTV after she graduated, and she's worked at the Discovery Channel. She worked at Miramax Productions briefly, and a number of other places, and she was primarily based in New York. So Jodi is originally from Atlanta. Well, I guess originally from New Jersey, right?
Yeah,
but
New Jersey.
Grew up in Atlanta. Yeah, but she was working in New York for, gosh, more than a decade, I think.
Too long, yeah.
Yeah, a long time. And now she has gone back to Atlanta, and she's launched her own firm, which is doing television production. And I think she's doing some really interesting stuff combining television production with social media and kind of packaging it. So do you want to talk about that first, Jodi? Let's welcome Jodi to
I mean, I will talk about that, but I want to know what I get for Alumna of the Month. I didn't realize that was part of the...
You get invited back again.
Oh, okay. If I do a good job, okay.
Yeah, no, the Furman Fundraisers will contact you. That's what it means.
Do they still do it where you donate when you graduate? You can donate your housing deposit, and that's your donation, and they stay off your back for 5 years?
Yeah.
I highly recommend that one. No, I mean, thank you for the intro. It's really nice to be here. Thank you guys for having me. But yeah, I'm based in Atlanta right now, and I've launched my own company. It's my own production company. And we are packaging and selling original content for nonfiction media and documentary film. But I think what Dr. Armstrong was alluding to was some of the stuff that we're doing in the social media space. So a lot of production companies in LA and New York and Atlanta to some extent, they just sell TV and film. And what we're doing, which is a little bit different, is we're looking for talent, particularly who has a good social media following. And from there, and when I say good, I think 50,000 people or more, maybe on Instagram or Snapchat, depending on the social media medium. So micro-influencer, someone who's that level. And sponsoring their social media. So the first step of the whole, it takes a long time to sell a TV show, as I'd imagine you guys would probably guess. So while you're doing that, talent gets impatient. And they're like, where's my money? I signed with you, what's going on? And one of the ways that I think that we've learned to do a larger profit share with talent and really actually understand who their businesses and who they are is to be able to get their social media sponsored while they are waiting for our TV show to go and sell. So I'm trying to think of a good example. We talked about this in Mass Comm, but the Fixer Upper couple are an ideal, I think, example of people who have really taken social media, expanded it into television, and then they were like, nah bro, I'm not going to play your HGTV game and take, the network was taking 40% of their magazine, of their home goods line, so they're like, we're out. And so then they're just doing their own products. But they're a great example of someone who's taken their social media to television and then expanded it into product, and that's kind of what we're trying to get to do with my company. And formerly, it was very much, and still is, if you're a producer, you just make your producer fee. And if you're a talent, and I'm in front of the camera, you just make a talent fee. But now, we're kind of trying to write deals in a new way for the company where everyone's sharing in profit. So, for example, if I paid you to be on TV and we're going to put you on TLC and fix up your foot, if we were to do that, you would get some kind of fee for it. Maybe we make a series about it, and that was it. But if I gave you some of my salary as your showrunner and someone who's actually making the show, it would inspire you as talent who's in front of the camera more to work with me and help me come up with story arcs, to involve other people in your life into the show, to make the show better. So by, investing in each other, in all these creative roles that happen on set, you're supposed to get a better product, in theory. Yeah.
And Jodi, as I said, you spent most of your career in New York, but you've kind of set up shop in Atlanta now. What are the advantages? We sort of teach, even in our Mass Comm textbooks, it says New York and Los Angeles are the centers of television production.
Is that what it says in the books?
Yeah, that's what it says. So
it's true.
Yeah, mostly, but it sounds like there's some things going on in Atlanta as well.
There are. I mean, I think there's probably a whole host of people. You've got some of you are graduating right away, and then some of you have some time. There are just so many jobs in these industries, in the entertainment industry specifically. And I'd say Atlanta is a great place for people who are starting in an entry-level position who want to get into storytelling, but maybe aren't ready to make that full leap to New York, to move to New York and be like, bye everyone that I know in the Southeast. Atlanta's a good spot for that. They have, I mean, we were just, at lunch we were talking about, Marvel has a larger deal with Pinewood Studios. Tyler Perry, he basically bought an entire military fort and has converted it into Tyler Perry Studios down there. So there's a lot of production work. So if you're interested in being a DP, lights, any sort of skilled labor on the production side, Atlanta's a great place to start. It really is. Most of the work, like if you're into writing, screenwriting, or being a producer, or a showrunner, or a director, most of the work that's being commissioned, that's being produced in Atlanta is commissioned from New York or Los Angeles. So depending on where you want to go, like into whatever role, that can kind of drive where you might want to move to after Furman if you're interested in entertainment.
Jodi, looking around this room, I see actually quite a few students who I think are going to graduate from Furman someday. And you know, you were in the same position a few years ago. Talk us through kind of your career at Furman, and then the early part of your career breaking into the business, and what kinds of things you did here and afterward that were helpful in that.
So I grew up in New Jersey, but I'm really kind of grew up in Georgia. So I'm from the Southeast. That's where I was raised, and then yeah, I was looking at a bunch of different schools, and I really liked Furman's Lake, and so I went to Furman. Very, very, very thought out process. But yeah, I was involved. I was a comm studies major here. I had like 4 or 5 classes with Armstrong, and I was involved on campus. I was on FUSAB and OSTAF, and as a KIO, and what else? Like all sorts of things, all sorts of activities. I think that probably of all the activities that I did that kind of led me to TV and entertainment, FUSAB was definitely that thing. But in terms of the degree itself and comm studies degree, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to get my first job without having this on my resume, like this program specifically. But when I was between junior and senior year, I lived in New York for a summer and interned at MTV, at TRL, which used to be a music show. I love telling you people that. You're like, I don't know what that is. It launched Carson Daly, who was he the host of The Voice now or something? Anyways. So worked there for a summer. And then after graduation, I had already moved to New York, actually, even before, like senior week, I was there and had a job there. So I worked at Viacom and MTV and MTVU actually for a short time, for, I want to say, a year and a half. And then I got a job at Discovery, also in New York City. And my first job there was actually in branded entertainment, so it wasn't even in production or development. It was working with the advertisers. So basically in television, the old school TV model, which currently exists, is that if you spend over $10 million on commercial units for Discovery Channel, we'll be like, oh, thank you so much for your $10 million. We'll give you added value. And at that point, you can choose to integrate your product if you want into a show, create custom content. That's our talent from Deadliest Catch and like Coors Light. So that's what I started out doing, was really marketing production work, I guess. So working with advertisers, but producing the commercial spots and working with production to get them integrated into the shows. And then I didn't like that, and so I transitioned over to a development production role within Discovery, working for Animal Planet and Investigation Discovery and TLC and OWN. I worked for Oprah for a little while. And it was really, that's basically project management work. It's a lot of desk work, to be honest with you. You're not the one producing the shows, you're hiring someone to do it for you. So it's a lot of internal liaising with people saying like, this is a great idea, I have this great idea for our Broken Foot show, and this is what I want to do, and this is how we're going to film it differently. Convincing people to commission the work, hiring all the right people to do the show. So it's project management. And then until now, and then I'm starting my own company and being on the other side of the table and pitching the network people and saying, hey, I've got this great Broken Foot show. So it's kind of, I'm a freelancer now, but usually it starts out an entry level if you're interested in entertainment, where you start out as a freelancer and then you move to a network or a studio. So I kind of did it backwards than some people did. And it was really just a matter of convenience in finding a position at a network, which was more challenging. So I got the gig because I was like, I'm going to take it. So yeah, and I guess like day to day, this is not what you asked, but day to day, it's like, it's just finding stories. I just like, at the end of the day, you're just like a story catcher. If you like telling stories, you tell a good story at like dinner with your family or something, or you're really interested in characters and people or formats or just whatever you're super passionate about in story, like, could be a really cool job for you. I really like it. It's really interesting, and you really can kind of make your own way. Like, I don't know one person that has the same career path as me versus someone else. Whenever you get on set, you always start talking at craft services and you're saying like, where are you from? What'd you do? And everyone has a different story about how they fell into it. So that's the way I did it. It is not recommended. I'm here to tell you, like, don't do it that way, do it another way. But really, there's so many different ways to get in, to break in.
Jodi, you know, as you just said, there are a variety of ways to get in, but I think one thing that seems to be fairly common, having spoken to you about this already, is that you really have to, it's fun work, but you have to pay your dues, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
What was that like in the early years?
It was terrible. I was living, like, I mean, it was really bad. I was living at what essentially was a women's shelter in New York, which kind of a homeless shelter. I didn't know it though. Sponsored by Volunteers for America, because I didn't know anybody. I was working a full-time, like for the first year and a half in New York, I was working a full-time job at MTV, and I was an executive assistant to the heads of production at MTV. So it's answering a lot of phones, getting coffee, I mean, doing weird tasks that they wanted, all the while tangentially learning the production process, so very valuable. But I was also bartending on the weekends, and I was also a reader at Miramax, so like I would run coverage over to the studio. And
tell us what a reader does for
got it, yeah. A reader is another entry-level job that you can get in scripted film. So most movies are made by, like, you know, Chris Evans going to Bob Weinstein and saying, like, hey, I got this great film and I have this great DP, I want to make this movie, give me $20 million. Every other idea has to pass through a reader at a studio. And their job is to read submissions for scripts and then write a one-page paper, essentially, that is coverage, and it's an executive summary. So it says what the script was about and whether it was good or not, and could they see that studio making that film. So back in the day, I never put this on my resume because I was technically an illegal employee of Miramax, but I was reading for...
there are a lot of illegal things that happen there, apparently.
Absolutely, yes, exactly. And that was not the worst thing that happened there. Thankfully, I never met the Weinsteins. But like I was reading for Bob Weinstein's office. So by the time a script made it all the way up the ladder to Bob's office, and he was the one that wrote the checks at Miramax at the time, and then they branched out and started the Weinstein Company. But anyways, long story short is that I would read it and I'd provide coverage, and it would end up on Bob's desk. I had no idea who I was doing it for, but it was very much a crazy job, and that's probably a TV show in some way. Because like they would send out, so my friend Matthew Signer was Bob Weinstein's first assistant. He had 3. And one time Siggy passed a script to Bob and said, here, so-and-so wants you to read, so-and-so wants you to read it. Bob said, did you like it? And he was like, I don't know, I didn't read it. And he got so mad at him. Mm-hmm. And he said, why are you here? If not to learn the business and learn why things are good, why we make things, why they're good business decisions and bad business decisions. So after that, Siggy, his assistant, hired me to read the scripts and give him coverage. So I would get paid out of Bob Weinstein's checkbook, personal checkbook, but it was Siggy writing the checks for me. So I was technically never a Miramax employee, but that's suffice to say, he would literally send a voicemail, this is how long it was ago, on our giant Nokia brick cell phones that were like this big, and he'd say, hey, the new Jennifer Weiner book is on the stores at Barnes & Noble at 9 a.m. on Saturday. First person to give me coverage gets $100. So we would read it as fast as we, and he'd send it to 5 people because he needed it on his desk Saturday afternoon. And so whoever got it first would get $100. So it was like its own reality show, I guess, in that way. But like I remember, like honestly, I would never buy the books because I was too poor, but I would sit there in Barnes & Noble and read the book for free. and then bring my laptop, my giant like compact laptop, and like write the coverage, go to the FedEx, print it out, and then run it across the street to 1613 Paramount, and hope that I was the first one there, because if I saw someone else reading the book and not paying for it, they were probably writing the coverage too. And so it was a bit of a race, but a lot of dues paying is a long way to say that, you know. I was telling Dr. Armstrong, if you're interested in getting into entertainment, and it's just so much fun, I love it, it's so great, but if you are, like, the first thing that I would say is just buy a very good pair of shoes, like comfortable shoes, because you will be on your feet all the time. Like, you will be running around as a production assistant or an executive assistant, like literally running around, like sweating, like it's a hard job, carrying things, crying sometimes in like the stairwell, like I mean, like, because people were mean to you, like it can be difficult sometimes, you know. I don't know anyone who doesn't have a story about the time that so and so made them cry. Like, everyone's got a famous person made me cry story, and all that to say, it is hard work, but I really enjoyed myself, and I do think it's valuable, and we're desperate for original ideas, and if you come from an interesting background and have a really unique perspective and point of view, this could be a really good career for you. Because, I mean, you look at what you watch, it's all like sequels to things. How boring is that? It's because there are not original ideas and original content creators. And I think if you are someone who is really motivated, I think, you know, a lot of you might go like on a corporate track perhaps, or an academic track. But if you're someone who's really motivated by good stories, like if I could ask you your favorite movie and you could talk about it for 30 minutes, this could be a good career for you. You know, it's not necessarily the fast track to success, because there is some pavement pounding that's needed. But if you like have a film that like inspired you, or even like if you're a very visual person, you know, this could be a good track for you, or you're a writer. You know, if there's like an artistic bone in your body that needs to be filled some way, like I do think this could be an interesting job. And there's so many different kinds of jobs you can have too.
Questions from the audience? Who wants to go first? Please.
So when you say you start out doing freelance work, what is that? Just literally pitching ideas to someone? Well, I guess you're the one pitching them. So like, if I had an idea, I would go to a studio head and be like, "Hey, listen, I have this really cool idea. I have this many Instagram followers.
Yep.
Da, 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 da." Like, is that literally?
Yeah, if you're
that?
I'd say most of the freelance entry-level work would be something assistant in your title. That would be the title you should be looking for, like executive assistant, or production assistant, or coordinator. One of the great things about this industry is it's I guess for in your favor is it's ageist, and so we're looking for young people. So you would take a position that would be at a production company, you know, working for me on a shoot or something, or a show, or working a film, like a scripted film. Maybe you go to Atlanta and you work at Pinewood and work for like a new Marvel movie, and you would have access to all the right people. They're all in the room. Your role would technically not be to do the pitching, but I mean, the only reason that I've been able to move in this career is that somebody very nice said, "Hey, you're not a dummy, maybe you should follow me and I'll give you a job, and pitch me your ideas. You know, you're a young, hip person, like, give me your ideas." That really is very much this industry, is like, what's new, what's hot, and then obviously we look to all of you to tell us what that is. So it wouldn't necessarily be the first part in the process, but it would certainly be a part of your daily, yeah. And talent too, you know, like if you want to be in front of the camera maybe. That's a huge part of it, I think, is proving that you have a unique audience. What's great about Instagram that I've learned is that they give you, if you're a verified public figure, you get instant insights. So when I post, I can see exactly what's happening and who's watching and where they live and their age and, you know, what they ate for lunch and all this stuff. And if you are somebody who can interpret that data quickly, you can be very smart about an audience, how to curate an audience for yourself. But that's a long way to say that, yeah, I think if you have big ideas and you're always like, we should do this, or even if you're saying things like, you know, I would love to start a business for this reason, I feel like entertainment could be if you're an entrepreneurial person, it could be a really interesting job for you. Mhm.
Other questions? Well, while we're waiting for some more questions from the audience, Jodi, you mentioned finding a mentor. I mean, I think that's clearly a very important thing to have really in many fields, but particularly the entertainment field. To talk about how that kind of went for you.
Yeah, so I was on the corporate track at Discovery, and I was working for ad sales, and it was very much like I just wasn't being creatively fulfilled. So, they'd give you a brand brief and say, Volkswagen wants to be integrated in a Science Channel show. Can you think of something? And I'd be like, okay, yeah, we could do these shows. So that was a lot of the job, was pitching commercial ideas. And I was like, this isn't really what I want to do. I like the storytelling and I like production, but I don't like working for the man and like being like a real slave to brands, to be honest. I felt like it was a little tricky for me. So one of the executives at Discovery, who was my real sponsor, Marjorie Kaplan, she was at the time the general manager of Animal Planet, she started a program within the company, and there's all these big companies have these kinds of programs, a lot of them do, where they were like, hey, let's take these young kids and put them into creative roles in the company, because nobody gets into, and no one wants to work in commercial operations in entertainment. No one wants to run the commercial ads, and like move the satellite. Like they wanted to be doing something creative. So she found a bunch of people, and it was like a ridiculous application process, but there were 3 of us in the end, and we got to rotate and move around between different creative roles in the company. So working at different networks, working on different shows, working on like big thought leadership projects for Discovery. So she was my mentor. She pulled me over to that side, because otherwise I'd probably still be doing, some kind of marketing or advertisement. And I knew that wasn't my track. So yeah, she was my mentor and is my mentor. And she, it's good to find a good mentor. I mean, you kind of run in tribes, right? Like you run in packs, your wolf pack, because whoever gets you on your first job will be the person who pulls you on the next job, who will be the person who pulls you on the next job. So it really is important to make relationships with people who are like 5 years your senior. Like I can actually tell you, I know people who are exactly 5 years older than me who have been doing this 5 years longer, and then I'll take their job next year. There is like a real path depending on what job you take. But having that person, because you don't have any work experience right now, that's just the reality, is that there's not enough on your resume necessarily for me to say, yeah, I'm gonna give you $55,000 a year to work on my social media account for a multi-billion-dollar industry. Like, it's a big responsibility. But I could say, I like the cut of your jib, you went to Furman, so-and-so's recommended you, I'm willing to take a chance on you. You're kind of looking for those types of people to do that.
Jodi, even in the entertainment industry, I mean, you have to go back a ways in the entertainment industry to see this, but there was a time when you could go to work for a big studio in Hollywood and you could just stay with them for a long time.
Yeah.
But that's long gone. But, it's been like that in a lot of other fields too, where you go to work for the company, you're there 30, 40 years, you retire, you get your gold watch, but everything is really changing as to where people kind of cluster on projects, and then those get done, and then you kind of find another project, and that's really the way the workplace is in a lot of industries now, and it's different for somebody like me. But what's that like? What do you like about that? And what do you dislike about that?
I think that if you're working on depending on whatever production you're working on, if it's a big budget production, whatever that means relative to your experience, your pack that you're moving with and that you're being hired with, they're at the top of their game, and so you can learn so much from those people. If you're not an inquisitive, curious person and you wouldn't be like, hey, what kind of camera are you shooting on me? This probably isn't a field for you, But if you are, there's a lot to be gained from these people because they know what they're doing, which I think is really cool. On the other side of things, there is no stability. It's great to be learning things, and it's great to be networking and building relationships. And
how much insecurity do you feel that I don't know what I'll be doing next year? I mean, I'm sure I'll be doing something, but I don't know what it is. Is that?
I mean, I live in a constant state of panic, but that's not respective to the industry. That's just my personality. No, I mean, you know, I've got over a decade of experience under my belt, so I know I'll always find work. I'm not worried about that. But starting out, it is insecure, and you have to think about, I mean, I would even take it even like a step farther and say, again, like, what drives you? Like, my best friend, Allie, she graduated from this program as well my same year, and she works for Comcast in affiliate sales, and she sells advertising, like car commercials and commercial space on all of the networks. We can get into that mess another time, what is a national commercial and an affiliates commercial, but she's an athlete, she plays basketball, and so like numbers are what drives her. You tell her she needs 10 points in the final 20 seconds of the game, she can get it. You tell her that she needs to make $150,000 next quarter, she'll do it for you. Like, that is why she does what she does, because she likes goals and she likes to finish the job. A career in television or film is very much like a never-ending, like it's kind of a circle of disappointment in that like a project never really closes, even when it's done. But if that's what motivates you and you like telling a good story, I don't remember what the question was. What did you ask? I'm sorry. What did you ask?
Oh, just about how the business, you know, you go through a project and then you kind of
Bebop
have
around.
to start all over again.
Yes, it is kind of like, I guess, to consider what your daily would be like upon entry level, it is kind of uncertain. If you're somebody who isn't good at being vulnerable necessarily, or doesn't and needs to know where their next paycheck is coming from, that's just the reality of life. Most of us are not independently wealthy yet. It can be trying. Mm-hmm. So I think you really have to hustle, you know, because you don't necessarily know, like a gig, like someone will hire you for a gig and they'll say it's 8 weeks and then it's 6. And you're like, well, great, now I have 2 weeks where I'm not getting paid. So that happens a lot. And it's something to consider, obviously.
I guess I'd like to make one last comment, ask you a question, and I'm going to pontificate a little bit, but I tell students this because I really believe it, that, you know, when you're thinking about a career, you should be doing it for the right reasons, and some of the right reasons at least are that you like the basic work, you know, you like what you're doing every day, and you generally like the people you're working with. And, you know, in talking to Jodi, you know, what I think really comes across is she loves telling stories, and that's kind of the basic work you're doing. Do you want to expound on that just a little bit?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a story to tell you about how I like to tell stories. What's cool about this job is you get to meet a whole lot of different people. Some like top level people. Like I remember, like, you know, I got to meet Joan Rivers, and I'm a huge fan of hers. It was right actually before she passed, and I'd just seen Piece of Work, and I was such a fan. I love, like, her stories are interesting, even the ones that are not told on film and TV. She was really cool and interesting. And on the other side of it, I'll say that I met Steve Bannon pitched me a show for like a year and a half, and so like I have his number in my phone and his email address. Like he's like a work contact of mine, because he used to, before he was at Breitbart, he was working for ArcLight Entertainment. And so we can talk about that whenever you want. But you know, if you are a story catcher and like, you know, I'm interested that you moved, and I was like, tell me about where you I don't know, maybe there's a Greenville story there. Like you do have to be a curious person, I think. And I think that is just a big
I think
default setting.
There should be a sitcom about a college professor in a small southern town. Yeah, all his adventures.
I know someone who can write that for you.
I'm working on the Instagram.
That's okay, good. All right, I'll sign you.
Jodi, thank you so much.